I've never seen a diamond in the flesh. I cut my teeth on wedding rings.
Dude, that's pretty cool.
Man,
On this
that
sad
is a
clown.
sad
That's
clown.
Proud of my address.
Dude, that's pretty good.
This is The Gloom, bringing you weekly interviews with F3 Omaha Packs, exploring their F3 experiences and finding those sticky elements that create the glue in the gloom.
There we go. We got another guy that's just full of smiles, and I love seeing this guy. I remember this man just recently, actually earlier this year, was my cabin leader at the F3 Omaha Men's Retreat. Has just been a phenomenal leader within F3, and has actually got a really great story on how he got engaged with F3 and then left for a while and then came back, which I think resonates with a lot of guys. But also just a really stand-up guy as far as a husband and father and friend and man. So Superfly, great seeing you, man. And where we'd like to really start off is just give us that story of who EH'd you, how'd you get started, what was that first workout like? And then I don't know, is your maybe you have a second first workout? Tell us about about that journey there.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So yeah, name is Superfly. Dave Swearingen is my hospital name. 44 for another week. So we got that going there. We'll get that out of the way. So I started that first summer back in 2018 with a guy named Specimen, who you probably know pretty well. He spent the better part of probably 2.5, 3 months really putting that headlock in, and it was, I mean, Specimen. It was never like, hey, I'm just gonna park in the driveway and honk until you come out. But it was one of those. It was pretty strong EH, and I just kept pushing him off. And so finally, on my 40th birthday, we had Oracle landed on my birthday, and I was like, all right, I'll give it a whirl, and I'll try it out. And I don't remember if it was my first beat down or it was maybe the weekend or two after. There was a guy named Dufresne. This beatdown really sticks out. We were on the backside of the field house with that practice football field that had the little trench on the backside of it, and we did the tunnel of love, and everybody came out just absolutely filthy. It was. I came home and my wife's like, "What did you get into?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "It was awesome." I said, "This part wasn't awesome, but it was so much fun." So yeah, Specimen was my EH. Wait time was the cue that day, and man, during the Namorama, I probably went through like what felt like 15 to 20 different things before wait time. I had mentioned the coaching that I do, and he's like, "What do you coach?" I said, "Well, I coach baseball. I've coached wrestling. I've coached soccer." He's like, "Wait, wrestling? Like WWE?" And Superfly stuck, and it was one of those, like, in the moment, you're like, God, wrestling's like one of the further things down on my list that I would have thought of that was a sticking point. Because I didn't wrestle in high school. So it was just one of those, like, I've always been around the sport because of my family, but it wasn't my jam. And so, yeah, that name stuck. And, it's one of those, I think, it grows on you, right? And now that it's my identity. It's who I am. So you mentioned the other piece, too, about my 2.0 version. So I came back, it'll be 2 years, I think next week. So it'll be like the first week of August. I came back as really a push from a buddy of mine that had gone and done one workout over in Gretna, called me up and told me about it, and a great guy. And it was just one of those, like, we'd gotten together for a team outing for baseball, and he was telling me about it. I'm like, dude, if you're going, I gotta go. So I landed at top rope, and the first day back, we were on the backside of the school, and for those that haven't been back there, there's a really hard lip of, like, the sidewalk runs right off, about 4-inch drop into the dirt on the backside of the school. And we were running around the backside of the school, and I misjudged the edge of the sidewalk and took a pretty nasty tumble, but I tumbled and, like, shoulder rolled out like a true wrestling coach would, and popped back up on my feet. And Tater was right behind me. He goes, "Who the heck is that guy?" And wait time was right next to him. He goes, I know that guy. I know that guy. I think it's Superfly, and he's back. And so that was 2 years ago. And so yeah, it's been a heck of a ride. I've been really consistent. So I fart sacked it like probably as hard as anybody has since joining F3, and then those guys that have come back. I called it a fart sack probably October, November, that first summer of 2018 when it got cold. And that was the opportunity for me just to like use that as the excuse and say, hey, I'm going to go sad clown it up and just woe was me because it's too cold to get outside. And
Right.
so when I came back round two, that was a way for me to like come back in the fall. And I kind of made a promise to myself, and I made a promise to my wife to, give it a shot during the winter and just, work through that. And it was a blessing, like being able to grind it that first winter and be able to just kind of embrace the suck of being out there in the cold every morning really helped me build some really strong relationships over the winter.
Well, I commend you for doing that. I mean, I think some people take the opposite approach, especially after leadership, right? When I pass the torch, I'm like, I have no obligation to be out here in the cold and in the suck anymore. What are we talking about the period in between? Is it like 2 years we're talking, a year?
Well, so yeah, we're looking at what, late 2018 to middle of 2021. So
Okay.
a good almost 2.5 years where it was a hiatus, and it was one of those we had moved the summer of 2019. So I lived 2 doors down from Specimen, and that's how the EH happened. And we moved into a neighborhood just about a mile to the west, but I didn't see him as much because we were kind of in opposite directions in our life at that point. And it's kind of fun. Like if you called Specimen up today, Plague, and he'd be like, hey, who was one of those guys that got you to come back out this last year? Not to brag, but it was one of those, like, we kept bouncing into each other because of school. And I kept like, hey, are you going to come out this weekend? You're going to come out this week? And so finally he started coming back out and got him back on the Q schedule for the first time in like 5 years this last spring. So it was pretty cool to see that kind of come back full circle and him help me, and then I get to help him.
That is cool. I do kind of want to go back, and I'm just curious, what do you think it was, the difference between, your kind of startup to then your second startup? What was it this second time around that got you more plugged in or more committed? Was it the guys? I mean, the 2021, we're kind of coming out of COVID-ish era. Is it some of that?
Yep. It was a little bit of everything. One was a big push from my wife, and I saw it as being in the financial world. 2020, 2021 was literally just like as fast as you could go for as many hours a day as you could go, right? Especially in the mortgage world. And so like the hours I was putting in and just the stress that, there was phone calls all the time, and it really started taking a toll on me, which, took a toll on my family as well. And sort of, I was irritable, I was cranky, I was snappy at the boys, I'd snap at my wife. And so it was just one of those where I needed an outlet, and she saw it. Like as soon as I started going back to F3, it was like, okay, there's that outlet. And, for that piece of it, the workout was that first piece, right? No different than the first time out. It was go get a workout in and feel better about yourself. And then, you really you become vulnerable in those moments in the gloom and in the circle of trust. And the relationships that I built. And Doppler was one of the first guys that really just put his arm around me and said, you're here, you're going to be here, and we want you here. And him and I have built a pretty amazing friendship over the last couple of years, and so thankful for those guys like Doppler. And there's so many others that I could thank, but he really sticks out just because of that arm, around the shoulder that he provided right away.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's just cool to hear that it can be done. I think there's so many guys that are maybe in your same spot. They've watched us grow and they're like, well, I can't go back now, right? It's been 3 years since I've seen those
Yeah.
guys and I love to hear that you were welcomed, just like we would expect you to be, and there wasn't like, I would be curious your thoughts on, um, as you think about like your family, you mentioned starting to have an impact on your family. I mean, any thoughts for like other guys? Is there, maybe they've been in F3, maybe they are just coming to the workout, but has it just been the workout, or is it the relationships that have really been that outlet? I think I'm hearing you say it's been the relationships too, but
Yeah. Yeah. And one of those things like, so you had Oompa on recently, and I was leading a beatdown at Spike when he was side Q, and this just really stuck out. And I had said something in my COT, and it was to the fact of, I mean, there's guys that you would never expect are pushing you, that are pushing you. And the comment I made was, guys, just show up, because you don't know who is pushing who. It could be the guy that's, 5'10" and 300 pounds and is trying to lose 20 pounds, but he could be motivating the guy that's just getting up for the first time, but has been an athlete. And so you don't know who is motivating who is pushing who. And so the best part about being out there in the mornings is the fact that any one guy can push another guy, no matter where they're at in their life, no matter what stage they're going through, whether it's at the highest of highs or the lowest of lows. There's always those moments where, and it could be day to day too. I mean, it depends on who you bounce into that day. You just don't know who is pushing who. And so, bring your A game, bring your effort, and be vulnerable in those moments. But
yeah, I guess the
yeah,
other question I would have for you is, do you think, because we have access to this roster, right? And I could
yeah,
I could guess like, okay, maybe if we send a text or an email to these, 1,200 guys, but was there anything that F3 could have done, or did that change have to happen inside of you? I mean, where do you, or like, could we be doing more to reach out to those guys that showed up in that first year and haven't been back, or what's your take on
you
that?
know, I think some of it could be. I think some of it is just, it's different for every guy, right? I mean, I don't care if you're reading the word or if you're you have stages in your life where different things mean different things, right? And so I think from a leadership aspect, my brain goes to pick up the phone and ask them. You know, we haven't seen you out in a while. What do you need from F3, or what is missing in F3, or is it's just not at your phase in your life that you have access to be out there and at that time of day. I It's amazing what happens when you don't live behind the keyboard, whether it's text message or email, and just pick up the phone and say, "Hey, man, how you doing?" There's been some really impactful conversations that I've been able to have the last 2 years. Just shooting a random text message to somebody, man, "Hey, how you doing? What's your week look like?" And so I think, yeah, just picking up the phone and calling. And you had asked a question about, like, what was it? It was definitely the relationships. I mean, the fitness piece of it helped create an outlet for my energy, but also the relationships, that knowing that somebody else could be going through or is going through the same thing that I'm going through. But also stuff that I've gone through in the past, somebody could be reeling with right now. And so I think, again, it goes back to you don't know who's pushing who. We've all gone through stuff, right? And whether it's alcohol or pornography or drugs or depression or whatever it is, there's somebody within this group of guys that has experienced this or is experiencing it right now. And so I think, just, you don't have to like pour your guts out to a guy, but just being vulnerable and saying, "Hey, this is what I've got going on," and just shut up and listen, sometimes is the best thing you can do.
Yeah, curious. I mean, do you feel like, what you're getting from F3 translates well into like your normal day to day? Like, hey, I'm being more vulnerable here at the COT, or I'm opening up with more guys. You catch yourself having some residual kind of positive feedback just outside of this workout group?
Well, I think it's relationships, right? At the end of the day, whether it's family, whether it's business, whether it's F3, it's are, are you are you pouring in or are you taking away? And in order to, I didn't say that right, but you know what I mean? Like to the point where like you get in what you put out, you're going to get out what you put in is what I meant to say. And, it doesn't matter if it's in a networking environment for work or whether it's your family or your fitness. If your effort is garbage, you're going to get a garbage output. Right. And so, um, I think not to say go like crazy insane all in because, I'm sure you guys have friends like that too, that just become almost addictive to what they're doing. I think you have to have that balance, right? Of, hey, if you're going to train for a triathlon, it can't be your only focus because you have so many other things that pull you in different directions too. So just making sure that you have that balance within life is, to me, that's what it's all about, is being able to go have those outlets, but to make sure that you know who is there to support you and be able to lean on them too.
Yeah, I think I kind of like how you said it the first time, are you pouring in or are you taking out? As you were saying that, I was thinking, like we've got this perfect group that can serve the members in whatever season. Like I've certainly had some seasons
Yeah.
where I wasn't able to pour in, sort of like the group helped get me back in my boat so that I could pour.
Yep.
So I love that analogy. You mentioned kind of balance and relationships, and my mind kind of goes to the concentrica and like fellowship. But just give us kind of a little background on your family, because I know
Yeah.
you've had a baby, right, in the last few years, as you were a psyche, right?
Yeah. So we're going to start off with God's got a great sense of humor, and I'll explain here from there. So my wife and I, Tracy, we will be coming up on our 16th anniversary here in early September. So she's a very smart woman. We got married on 9/8/7. Can't ever forget that anniversary, right? And
Nice.
so yeah, so it's one of those, and that just was the tipping point of I knew that she was a really smart woman. No, she's amazing. We've got three kids. Carter is going to be a sophomore. Bennett will be a first grader, so 15, 6, and then Marley is almost 9 months at this point. And so we've got our baby girl in the house, and yeah, everybody's like, they're all yours. I'm like, yes, they're all ours. And it just God's got a great sense of humor, and it's one of those where we went through those moments of just being open and saying, is this where we're meant to be as a family? Is it a family of three? Is it and then we moved to Omaha 8 years ago from Sioux City, and we were dead set that it was going to be the three of us. And then God had a different plan for us. 7, 8 months later, we find out we were pregnant with Bennett, and the boys had always bugged us about having a sister, and lo and behold, we come back from a vacation, or we were on vacation, and so yeah, it's crazy how life works out. You think you have control, but it's not. And so yeah, it's been amazing. And so my wife jokes, she also does FIA a couple of days a week, and she always jokes with me. She's like, you have to continue F3, and you have to make sure that there's always leadership in place, because you always are going to need F3 to remain fit and healthy to take care of the family, because I'll be 62 when Marley graduates. So
That's high school. Graduates high school, right?
yeah, right. Just high school. Yeah. Just high school.
Yeah.
So it's one of those, like, I'm going to be looking for that respect at one point out there in the gloom, just to make sure that my butt can help be there for the kids down the road. So
I love that. And you know what?
yeah.
It's so funny because you're describing a phenomenon that I feel like is the opposite of our M's treating it as our mistress, right? You've got total buy-in from your wife, and she's part of FIA, so she kind of sees and gets her own taste and flavor of what you're doing. I love that you kind of have some shared level of similar activity, right?
Yeah.
And you're talking about your kids. I'm assuming you're getting buy-in from them. They're seeing a difference in you personally. Have you had an opportunity to share it with them, bring them to any
Yeah.
2.0 workouts or anything? Maybe talk
Oh
about that
yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah. So Carter, his F3 name is Dash. He actually got to cue a workout on his birthday. So the beginning of June for his 15th birthday, I had said that I was queuing and he should come with me on his birthday because I'm the queue at Combine that day. And he's like, well, why can't I queue it? I'm like, well, you got to go to a workout first. And like, kind of, he'd been to a couple 2.0 workouts and stuff. And I'm like, you got to come to a beatdown first before you get to lead. And so he came the week before. And a little background on Carter. So he's, like I said, he'll be a sophomore. He's up at Millard North and wrestles. Well, he qualified as a freshman for state. And so which was a pretty cool deal. And so he gets to his beatdown and he designed the whole thing. I just helped him come up with I just pulled out the lexicon for him and helped him change some names of his stuff. But he had a shoulder blowout essentially is what his thing was. It was core and shoulders and, on a grinder where he had 6 different types of merkins, and he actually wants to coin double wide merkins. Get your shoulder or your arms as wide or your hands as wide as you can and try to do a push up. Yeah, he had guys under their breath were going, who is this kid? This is tough.
Yeah.
And he was loving it. He was eating it up. And Rubbermaid, who was a wrestling official, he's like, dude, that guy's a state qualifier as a freshman. He's not a slouch. He's going to burn you out. Like, this is a wrestling workout. And so yeah, he had a blast with it. And Bennett is Jack kind of played off of the Dash theme there, and he's been to a couple of the 2.0 workouts in the fall. And the first time I took him out, I went to Oracle at 6, came back at 6:50, and my wife Tracy had said that he'd been sitting on the steps waiting for me to show up since 6:30. So yeah, they've definitely seen what it's done for me. So it's pretty cool to see now. I've got Dash coming out. We've been playing Ultimate Frisbee the last couple of Fridays with the group, and so we'll be out there tomorrow morning playing. And he loves it. He loves it. So the guys really welcome him in.
That's cool. You should submit the double wide merkins. I think you can just submit it online. I mean,
I'll have to do that.
Yeah, I love that. It's so cool. Just and selfishly as a father of 2 girls, I like knowing, right, that we're getting more, like, these are my daughter's future husbands, right? Someday, right? That's gonna be a prerequisite for my girls. Does he do F3? Does he have faith, and does he do F3? And if those are then
Well, and I think it just goes back to what fundamentals are you giving your kids, and what are you doing to help them see what a good person in society looks like. And whether it's fitness or whether it's just being a giver in your community, right? And that's one thing that my oldest has always had. And not to say that the other 2 don't, but he's always had that servant's heart. And I love that piece of him because it just oozes out of him.
That's cool.
Just, would be curious, not that we could have Dash on the podcast, but what do you think his perspective of the workout is? I mean, we're talking about, hey, we're getting relationships out of it and all this different stuff. Is he just thinking it's a fun workout, or do you feel like he actually gets things from it outside of just the beatdown?
I think first and foremost, it's time with Dad. It's a space where there's some commonality of it, where I'm going out and doing fitness stuff. He needs to be doing fitness stuff to stay in shape for what he wants to do athletically. And so I think that was kind of that key trigger of it's quality time with Dad that I don't have to share with Bennett or Marley because they're too young to be able to go do those things with us on a regular basis. And so I think that was the key trigger. But just seeing how guys like Scuba and Barbershop immediately just kind of took him under their wing and welcomed him in. And Tea Party was another one too at Ultimate a couple weeks ago. They just they were high-fiving him and cheering him on. They were trying to help him get a touchdown in the game. And so it was really cool just to see. He felt like one of the guys, right? And I think that's my takeaway from it. I think it'd be interesting to see what his takeaway is. That, I think a lot of it stems back to just having that quality time together with the two of us.
I think there's something too. I think it's Stephen Mansfield that wrote a book called Band of Brothers, but he talks about sort of this idea of giving your kids mentors that have similar values or beliefs, right? So like at some point there might be something that he doesn't, hopefully he's comfortable talking with you about, but if he's not, he's got access, and doesn't have to sort of search for answers on his own or in some other place that ultimately you wouldn't want him searching, so it's a lot of cool layers there.
Yeah, and he's got a really cool so his youth pastor at our church, which is actually, I see Sister Act all the time, anyway, his Carter's youth pastor is a wrestler, grew up in Iowa, grew up wrestling, and so they had an instant connection, and it's one of those where they've got a really cool relationship where they can just, like, Carter can text him at 9 o'clock at night and he'll get back to him, and just it's a really cool relationship to see how how that's grown over the last couple of years.
That's awesome. Hey, I'm curious. I appreciate it's great just hearing about your family, because I think it's just one of those pieces, right? We don't always get to know about guys, but I'm curious when you think about other relationships, right? So kind of, you mentioned Doppler. Would love just your thoughts on that second F piece, how you built relationships, and then sort of another question that just comes to mind for me is, the guys that were there when you first started, that were still there when you came back, were they accepting? I guess, I'm selfishly thinking of myself. Like I think I was at both your first beat down and that one where you came back, but I can be a jerk sometimes. So I don't know, like how were you, how from your perspective, how did all that feel?
I think from a perspective of, like, I think you have to be willing to lean in, or you got to have that one guy within the gloom that really just is willing to kind of be vulnerable and put themselves out there. And whether it's you got to make somebody feel accepted, right? And you hang back by the six with the guy that's first day that's really struggling, and you just kind of pour into him a little bit, or are you just gonna sprint and be at the front? And I think you need both of those, because it kind of helps push the group and motivate the entire group. But, like, my personality is, I want to, I mean, you've been to my site. It's one of those where I want to have fun. I want people to feel welcome, and have a good time, but let's get a workout in at the same time. And I get that mantra from my dad. Like, I worked with my dad. I had the fortune of working with my dad when I was a teenager, and it was always one of those where his mantra was, get your work done, work hard, get your work done early, and if you get it done and you still got time in the day, then you can have fun. But you got to get your work done first before you go have fun. And I love that piece of it. And it's kind of how I think that I'm carrying that on now too. And so, but as far as, like, yes, there was guys that were at that, those first beatdowns that I went to in 2018, that first summer and fall, that I did run into as I started coming back 2 years ago. And yeah, I mean, it was one of those. It was so welcoming, and I had met guys of like Tater, but it was instantly like I was part of the gang, and I had just stepped away for 5 minutes, and so I that was comforting, to say that those opportunities where you might step away for a little bit, but you come back, it's like you stepped into the Cheers bar. Like, you just come back in, and everybody's hollering Norm when you walk back in. And so I love that piece of it. And so many sites change year over year as far as, like, the regulars. But there's still always that core there that, as long as you keep bopping back, you're going to bounce into 2 or 3 of them every now and then. So.
Yeah, I like that, because I think it's important, right? And that's what we would want, right? It's because essentially, like, we don't, we don't always know what's going on in somebody's life, right? So that's the beauty of the group, right? If you got to step away for a while, or I think I'm inspired that you mustered up the courage and sort of the resilience to come back and to make that goal yourself. I think there's maybe a lot of guys that are just for whatever reason not doing that. But I do want to get your thoughts on the faith piece, and I want to hear your personal story, but would also love if you could share maybe like I don't know at what point the men's retreat sort of intersects with your story and the impact that might have had.
Hmm. So really the faith piece, it was one of those where, that's always been part of my life. And I think that's one of those, like, as you go through your mid-20s, you kind of step away from the true faith piece, and you're like, I'm going to challenge stuff. And, uh, but it was a push, again, a push from my wife. She's an amazing motivator and encourager. Right. And so, um, just really kind of dove back in, and we like I said, we moved to Omaha from Sioux City about 8 years ago, and we kind of drifted around trying to find a church that felt like home, that we really had a church that we truly called home back in Sioux City. And so just to be able to find that one that had that similar type vibe, and we landed on Brookside, and so coming out to F3, I knew who Sister Act was, or Rob, through church, and then bounced into him at a workout, and started finding out that there was tons of guys within Brookside that are F3 guys like Dollface and Barbershop and Beaver and Canadian Bacon, just to name a couple. Like, those guys just really stick out. And so the retreat came to me really the first time. So this last year was my second time. The first time was Grills and Sister Act found me at Combine, and they're like, why haven't you signed up for the retreat yet? And I'm like, I want to let guys that want to explore their faith, show up to that. He's like, why don't you come up and see if you get deeper in your faith, or explore your faith a little bit deeper and be vulnerable? I'm like, oh, okay. And so that's really how that piece came about of it. And I had a great experience, as a participant of the retreat, and it's a whole different perspective coming back the second year and being a cabin leader, a group leader, and not to take anything away from that, because it was also an amazing experience being able to be a group leader. But I think there's so many little things that you miss. Yeah, because you're always running around to meet up with the other leaders, like 5 to 10 minutes before you got to be starting the next thing. And so you're constantly like watching the clock, and you're like, oh, I gotta go. And so I think you miss out on some of those interactions that can be more authentic and kind of dive deeper into some guys' vulnerability. And so I thought that was, for me, that was one of those big takeaways from the retreat. Loved both experiences. I loved the opportunity to get to be kind of that fire starter within a group. I never wanted to feel like I was in control of it, but just kind of being able to like spark a question here that would dive into, see where that fire took us from those questions that we started with. And so the retreat for me, though, like, just to being able to have that space where you shut off, everything else, and really just dive into who you are and who you want to be, and where your faith kind of fits into that. And so honestly, I've never been a big journaler. I'm not a big writer. And 2 years ago at the retreat as a participant, that was the first time that I'd sat down and journaled. And it was really impactful for me. And just to be able to see some of those things that come out. I don't want to talk about all of it, because I want guys to go and see the impact that it creates. It's called impact for a reason. But just some of the things that come out of that retreat, it'll open your eyes. Even maybe not even from a faith perspective, but just open your eyes to really show you how lucky you are with the people that you have around you, whether it's guys from F3 or family or coworkers or whatever it may be. You kind of start seeing things in a little bit different perspective. But yeah, the camaraderie, the fellowship that happens at the retreat was really amazing, and just to be able to carry that outside of those 2.5 days that we're at the retreat and be able to have conversations outside of that, like we have with our group of just kind of, maybe it's a text message, check in and see how those guys are doing. And, we all go through stuff each and every day. And so what's going on? What are you seeing?
As someone who has yet to attend the retreat, I am curious, do you feel like there's some carryover from those retreats back into the group, whether formally or informally?
Yeah, and I think from a faith perspective, yes, we dive into some really deep conversations within the Bible, but we also dive into some really deep conversations around life experiences that other guys within F3 that are being asked to lead in these in this retreat have gone through as well. And I think of guys like Da Vinci. I mean, what he spoke about last year had a huge impact. Pantyhose. You hear guys' story of, we all know pantyhose. We all know that he's got the sock, but like just to hear the story behind the sock was, man, I was choked up. And I think from that perspective of, like we again, it goes back to the earlier conversation. We all go through stuff. What stuff are we going through right now, and what stuff have we gone through in the past, and the stuff we don't know could happen in the future, somebody else has already had within the group, and so they can be that shoulder, whether it's to cry on or whether to lean on.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, I think a lot of what we experience in the morning workouts, right, is like some of the walls come down and we can get vulnerable and we experience, growth and some clarity. The retreat, though, I think takes it a step further and brings down some of the emotional, maybe spiritual barriers that, at least for me, created a lot of clarity around, purpose and what's God's will for my life. And ultimately, what does God want me to be focusing on? And I mean, this wasn't my first time in a church experience, but to me, I just felt like, and honestly, I think the main reason is most of us are not carving out on a regular basis. So it gives you the time and the space and the structure that really promotes that sort of experience,
Well, and it's different for each person too. And I think that's what makes it amazing, right? Is you might have somebody that's coming in for the first time to explore their faith, and you might have somebody that came back like Waterboy, comes back for the second time to take in the retreat because he wanted to dive a little bit deeper than just scratching the surface. And I think that's the beautiful part about the retreat. And I think when you have those opportunities, whether you've got somebody that's really doesn't know what their faith looks like or somebody that wants to dive deeper, is it works for either of those guys. And I think that's the beautiful part about what Birdman and Sparty created within the retreat, is that it's not, it doesn't have to be one particular type of guy that can go in and get something out of the retreat. And I had one of our pastors at our church in Sioux City, he led our men's group. He always said, find that one nugget. That was his word, is find that one nugget that you can take away from this experience, whether it's a Bible study, whether it was a retreat, whether it's something that you went to a conference for work. Like what's that nugget that you took out of that and really can help kind of continue to build who you are as a person.
Well, not to be like controversial or too adversarial here, but for us in F3, right, is the concept is faith. It's not a particular faith. So,
right.
And I'm assuming this is all Christian theology based, right, for the most part. So how are we rationalizing that? Are we just creating an avenue for that particular subset of faith, or how are we navigating those waters?
I don't know if I have a full answer on that, but I think it's one of those where, yes, it does come off of the Bible principles. And so that's kind of where the the whole structure of the weekend goes through. Um, but it's not that we're saying that this is only it. And I think that's the best part about it is, yes, this sliver of this weekend is definitely the impact retreat has F3 guys there. It's not intended to single out, but it's an impact retreat. It's not an F3 retreat. And I think that's the biggest thing about it is that you can go do this, but you could create, I mean, no different than F3 itself. You can go create a new workout. You could go create something for a completely different faith to grab 4 or 5 other guys and start the same thing doing something else, because it's all about where you find focus, and if you can rally people around it to help create focus as well, right? Whether it's a 5K race or a new AO or a men's retreat to help, uncover some questions that you may have in your own faith.
Yeah, Pony, I think it's a good question. And as a lawyer, right? It's in the fine print. No, I'm kidding.
Well,
Yeah.
I have read Free to Lead, as you know.
Yeah.
I really like this idea that you're saying, well, it can be used as a blueprint, right? I mean, just like everything else that we do, it can be modified and made to be whatever it needs to be to serve whomever it needs to serve. So I think that's a great answer.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not going to hold anyone legally to anything. So
Yeah. Hey, Superfly, I am curious, kind of from just a faith perspective or maybe just a life perspective, where have you found challenges that you've maybe been overcome? And just curious if you would share anything in that space that somebody else listening that might be going through a similar thing could identify with.
I don't know if I have any like specific one thing, but it's one of those where, I mean, obviously I'm not a tall guy. Anybody that's worked out with me in the Gloom, I just handed over the reins on the tallest AO in Omaha, as a little play on words, right? So that's always, for me as a kid, that was always a challenge. I've got a baby face to boot, and so it was one of those. I got into high school, and I'm 4'11" and 89 pounds, and at our high school we had an elementary school just up the hill from us, and I had upperclassmen asked if I was lost in the wrong school, and so it's just that's always been one of those things that I've had to deal with personally. But I think it's one of those, as I matured, I let that have less and less effect on me, or tried to. But I think from that perspective, I think as you grow older, you figure out that it really doesn't mean much of anything. It's who you are as a person. And I've always tried to look at things in a pretty positive light. Obviously there's days where you just kind of get in that, oh, woe is me kind of mode where you're like, oh, everybody's against me. I can't win. I'm never going to win. I can't do anything right. What am I supposed to be doing? But I think if attitude's a choice, and the only other thing that you have a choice over is the effort that you put in each day. And so that's one of those things that I've really tried to teach my boys. I'm gonna teach it to Marley as well, now that we've got a baby girl in the house. And attitude and effort are the two things that you have control over each and every day. And so I think for me, just finding those moments where you can show somebody that those superficial things don't matter, right? Kind of goes. I love watching Ted Lasso, and I think that show has had such an impact. Just to kind of like reiterate some of my beliefs of you can create impact without being the tallest guy in the room, by being authentic.
I love that, and that's a nugget right there, right? The attitude is a choice that you shared, because I think it's interesting, right? How many guys have something that sort of is holding them back a little bit, right? It's like the way I perceive myself, and it's like I've got my things, and but unless we talk about it and like hear from either another guy or just hear ourselves saying it out loud, like hear like wow, I didn't know you struggled with your height, and I can see how that might be something that is difficult for you, but that's not how I see you. You know, when I look at you, I don't think about your height at all. And I think about your heart, you know, and so, but we don't know that unless we bring it up and talk about it. And it may seem silly or like a little thing, but it's still a thing, right? It's like a thing that that you deal with. And so I don't know, I think the more we can encourage guys to like, you know, look inside a little bit, figure out what that thing is, let's talk about it and get that out of the way so it doesn't prevent you from doing what you can do, what God created you to do. I love that. Thanks for sharing that, man. I'm sure that's not an easy thing to share all the time. So talk to us about leadership, because you mentioned the tallest AO, but you know, tell me about that. Just what it was like to receive the flag and lead, and then tell us about steeple too.
Yeah. You know, I think for me, one of those, like, proximity is important, right? And proximity has been crucial for me to continue to come back to F3. I'm blessed with with the neighborhood that we live in, that seriously, I can go a mile and hit about 8 AOs on any given day of the week. And so it's just 1 or 2 miles really. But so I'm blessed the fact that I don't have to run all over town to get a good workout in and be around a good group of guys. Top rope, like I said, Doppler was one of those guys that quickly put his arm around me, and while he was site Q at rope, and we built a really strong relationship. And it really wasn't long after. I mean, we were starting to talk about like succession stuff probably in January, and starting to have some real conversations around, you know, would this interest me? And leadership's always been kind of one of those, I feel like a God-given talent that I was blessed with, is that I just have this willingness to want to help coach, guide, and mentor. I hate the word manage. I never thought of myself as a manager. I wanted to be that coach, guide, mentor for somebody else. And so the opportunity to lead the site came up really, like I said, early in the year last year. And you know, I had said, we found out we were having Marley in March. And so it was one of those, like, I could have easily stepped back and said, you know, this isn't going to work because we've got the baby coming in the world and we've got all these other things. And I could have easily, and it would have been a valid excuse for 99 out of 100 people. And it was one of those where I had committed to it, and I had committed to getting up and embracing the suck and going out and doing my workouts, to where that was one of those accountability pieces that was like, at least I know I'm going to work out in on Wednesdays, right? And because I need to be at my site to make sure that everything's running smoothly, and we've got a guy leading a queue for the day, and that we're welcoming FNGs and doing all those things, and even guys that, you know, took a little fart sack and decided to come back, feel welcome when they come back in. And so that was where I really embraced it, is the fact that you know, there was mornings where I might have gotten 2 to 3 hours of sleep, you know, right after Marley was born in late October. And so but it was one of those, I knew that if I didn't do it, I would have FOMO later for not getting out and doing those workouts. And so like I said, for me, it became that really kind of accountability piece without having to lean on another guy for that accountability. Because I knew I had to be up and be present. I couldn't hit the snooze and get an extra half hour, 45 minutes of sleep. So, and then really, you know, as we kind of went through the year, I kept looking at a couple of guys that really felt like they kind of fit with the top rope mentality, and then they kept getting plucked from me. To be honest,
that's how it works, man.
yeah. I mentioned the name Boji, and then they were like, "Boom, we're gonna move him over here," and mentioned a couple other guys. You know, it was just one of those. One guy went through a career change, and so he couldn't do it anymore. And so talked to Steeple, and it was one of those, like, does this interest you? And he was like, well, yeah, it does. And the crazy thing about the whole deal is they had a baby I think within a week of when we had our youngest. And so, they were going through some of the same dynamics as we were within our house of the new baby in the house and trying to figure all those worlds out. And so, yeah, we kind of went through that a little bit. And then, we've always kind of had a wrestling background with top rope. Armbar started it out, and obviously he's still coaching now. And Doppler has been around wrestling for most of his life, and his boys wrestled for a while. And I was always around the sport. I wrestled until high school, and my brother wrestled through high school, and now my boys are both wrestling. And so it was one of those, like, I want to find that guy that's, a wrestler, or at least part of it. Well, we come to find out through talking to him that Steeple's family, his wife's side of the family, is big into wrestling, and now his kids are getting into the sport. And so that really kind of came, accidentally became full circle. And Steeple really did ruin it for us, though, because he's got probably 2 to 3 inches on the three of us.
Yeah, he's tall.
He's tall in top rope terms. He's over 5'8", so it's one of those where he's towering. But no, it was a really cool experience to be able to hand off the shovel. It was an amazing year to see, just the sustainability of what we did throughout the year. And when Doppler handed the shovel over to me last June, he was like, "Hey, July, August, you've got the Murph challenge, so you're gonna have a ton of guys because you've got Red Wings, built into your AO. So there'll be guys that come in and do a Smurf, and they'll stick around for top rope, and then it will slow down because of Apex and or Iron Packs." And he's like, "It'll slow down a little bit for that." And we never slowed down. We continued to have about 25 PAX members every morning. And we got into the winter, and Doppler's like, "Oh, just be prepared. You'll get down to like 8 to 10. That'll be pretty normal." We never slowed down. We continued to have 20 to 25 throughout the winter, and granted, it was pretty mild, but it was one of those where we were I felt so fortunate to have an AO that really never struggled through the winter, and we kept adding AOs around the area, and we added Catalyst, throughout the year. And we thought we'd lose guys I thought we'd lose 50% of the guys. So we lost a few, but we gained a few in the process, right? And so it was cool to see maybe not so much like net growth, but just the sustainability through all the expansion and all the changes that have happened over the last year within F3 Omaha. That to me was really fulfilling. And then obviously the shovel pass, man, that was that was an event none of us that were there will ever forget. As I'm holding a lightning rod, and if you haven't seen the picture on Twitter, I'm pretty sure somebody posted it to F3 Nation about how crazy we were with that. Tater caught a beautiful landscape picture of a thunderbolt behind us spreading across the sky as we're doing our Name-A-Rama. It was a little hairy. We had to trim and cut and paste a little bit of the beat down. We had to cut 15-20 minutes out of it, and we got to coffee as the rain came down, but nobody got hurt, which is a good thing. But it was a great year. I was so blessed to be around an amazing group of guys that it was a cool opportunity. I never rinsed and repeated a queue the entire year, which I had made that goal with Doppler. Like, it was kind of a stupid little like challenge goal that I put on myself. I'm like, I'm going to do my best to not rinse and repeat on a queue and see how far I can go. And to my knowledge, I'd have to go through the roster again, but to my knowledge, we didn't rinse and repeat the entire 52 weeks. So it was pretty cool year.
Well, that's incredible, man, and congrats on successfully handing off. You touched on a fear that most IQs have is we don't want to fail. We don't want one to fail, right? And you made it, and that's the most important part, is passing it on. Just one last question on leadership here. Early on you said, "Hey, I'm a God-given leader." Thankfully, it's a natural ability I have. I am curious. What was your takeaway? Did you get any key leadership takeaways that you were able to continue on and kind of help progress your growth there?
From F3 itself?
Yeah, or as your role as a psych Q.
Yeah. I think one of those things oh, like lean in and know what's going on with your people, right? And I think you can take that into your family, you can take that into your business world, your job every day that you're doing. Um, that was one of those things that I really tried to work on with my team professionally was lean in, figure out, when they're having a bad day, don't let them just kind of shut you off and say, I don't want to talk about it. Like if you're vulnerable, they feel more comfortable to be vulnerable. And I think that was one of those things that I figured out really early last, taking over the flag was like, you don't have to like spill your guts, but if you're just vulnerable and say, hey man, I'm having a bad day and just be honest. Like I'm not feeling it this morning. I feel like garbage. I didn't sleep well. I'm not going to get a good workout in. And then you figure out that somebody else next to you who's right there to pick you up. And I think, um, just communicate with the people around you and be vulnerable and have a conversation.
Yeah, that's great advice, man. And I think that applies to a ton of different areas. Later, Pony. Um, Tell me, one of the things that we've been trying to get from guys is just when you think about, your journey and, sort of where you're at today, what's something that you could use some encouragement or prayers for? What is in that space for you as we see out there in the gloom? What should we be encouraging you?
Hmm. That's a really good question. I don't like step back and think about that very often.
Mm,
And I think just, continued support of, um, for me, community is huge. And I figured that out very early on during the pandemic is, I'm one of those that thrive on having a community. Uh, to me to hermit up and to hunker down in my house. I was quickly volunteering to be the grocery runner or the errand runner, because it was one of those I needed to be around people. And I think that's for me the encouragement is just keep showing up because if you're showing up, I'm showing up. We can be better together and help another guy lose that sad clown um, persona that he's carrying around and he doesn't know it, right?
oh,
And so I think that's kind of the for me, if I can help lift somebody up, that's the encouragement. I feed off of those moments,
yeah.
and so yeah, that's what I need.
Okay. Awesome.
Keep bringing guys out.
Yeah, for sure, man. Hey, curious if there's anything else maybe that you were wanting to share that we didn't get to cover today or anything else you would add before we wrap.
No, I think it's just one of those like it's been a great opportunity to sit back and just kind of recollect on the year that um, it went so fast, and I know that sounds really, really cliche, but it's one of those where um, I guess my encouragement to the guys out there that maybe have thought about being a site Q or maybe they're just getting started with F3 or they haven't started at all. Um, be vulnerable.
Hmm.
Try new things um, because you don't know what you don't like unless you try it, right? I mean, you can say that you don't like it, but if you haven't truly tried it, you can't say that, right? And I think um, that's something I'm trying right now really hard to do is like just being willing to try new things, whether it's new foods, um, you know, getting out and doing a different style of workout or just whatever it may be, like just putting myself in being a little more vulnerable while still kind of staying within my character. And, um, it's one of those where, um, yeah, I want to see guys continue to get out there and stretch themselves, right? Be
Hmm.
better today than you were yesterday. And um, I think that's key for any of us, whether it's our eighth year in like wait time or whether it's your day one is tomorrow. And
Yeah.
it's what are you doing to be better today?
Yeah. Man, I love that. That's phenomenal. And just, thanks for taking time to share your story and really thank you for coming back. I
Yeah.
think I know the group is better today. I know I'm better today because we get to be influenced and impacted by you. So just thanks for everything that you're doing, man. Let's
Thanks,
we'll do a
brother.
little name-orama. I'll try to do Pony. Maybe I'll start with Pony here. We'll see if I can remember his age. I think he's still 29. He's still so young.
He,
Here we go.
he does look 29. So let's
Yeah.
go with that.
Yeah, John Whitworth,
29-ish.
John Whitworth, 29-ish. Pony Express. Nay. Brandon Fleardi, 37. The Plague. Yeah.
Dave Swearingen, 44. Superfly.
Superfly. And do you do like the people's elbow or just, you know?
Well, so the fridge, because I'm turning 45 next week and I can't do the double fours anymore. Fridge has got me doing this little butterfly fly thing now. So yeah,
I like it.
I think it's gonna stick.
Superfly. Yeah, I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Hey, thanks for your time today.
All right, bud. Hey, thank you. Appreciate you, brother.
Yep. Have a good one.
Yep. Bye.